is our second weed science stop. We have two weed scientists who are going to visit with you about some of the concerns across the state of North Dakota. And I think you know both of those, but just in case you don't, we have Drs. Richard Zollinger and Kirk Howatt. Dr. Zollinger has been here the longest. He's actually our extension weed scientist, weed specialist. He joined us in 1997. He's originally from Utah. He got his PhD at Michigan State University. The other gentleman is Dr. Kirk Howatt. Kirk is originally from Minnesota. He got his PhD from Colorado State. He's been with the NDSU since 2000. And Kirk has joint appointment as both research and teaching. His research focus has been small grain, weed management, and then he also works with a number of other crops, sunflower and some alternative crops. And Richard, he takes everything else. Richard asked me to mention what this demonstration is. It's a herbicide mode of action demo that we've been conducting for many years. We put it on primarily for a crop management field school that we have in late June. And so what we do is plant 8 crops, north-south, and then so we have corn in this end, spring wheat, peas, canola, dry beans, soybean, sunflower, flax, flax also. And then going east-west, we apply 8 different herbicides, trying to represent 8 different herbicide mode of actions. And so there's 10-foot strips through here. I treat the interior 5 feet, and then the people at the school are given a quiz to tell us which herbicide based on injury symptoms to the crop and or the weed. The idea of the demo is to give those participants some training on identifying symptoms based on the mode of action, and also help them know the different classes of herbicides, help them with resistance management. So most of the effects of the herbicides are wore off. Post-applied herbicides were applied about a month ago, so either the crops or weeds survived or they're dead, and not much in between.
Which weed has the most water-sucking power, according to these plots? Which plot does the corn look the absolute shrivelest? That's a good word. Wild. I think I mentioned this before. When we grow wild oat in the greenhouse for weed ID, sometimes we have to spray the wild oat pots twice a day just because they use so much water. Okay, the last 2 weeks, out of every 10 phone calls, 4 of them are on ragweed, and what are the other 6 on? Kosher. And this is usually how the phone call goes. Hello, this is Rich. Rich, I sprayed Roundup. I finally come back to look at the field. Kosher blew right through it. It's 16 inches tall. How do I kill it? I know that you've been given the secret papyri from Egypt, handed down through the generations. It contains all the mysteries of heaven, and you can come up with a recipe for me. How do I kill it? Well, I think for a minute, and I say, you got 3 options. You can use paraquat, you can plow it, or you can mow it. Well, that'll hurt my crop. Well, you asked me how to kill it. So, what's the point of this? The point of this is that ragweed and kochia are probably presenting a new paradigm for weed control. And it's forcing us to manage weeds instead of just control them. It's forcing us to look at, well, as Einstein calls it, a higher level of thinking than what we've been doing. Because if we don't, things are just going to get worse. I've talked to several people today that have asked me questions, and I point out that it doesn't matter how crafty that mankind gets and how much we think we're smart, Mother Nature always makes it difficult for us. She'll always point out the weakness. But in the deck of cards that Mother Nature gave us with kochia, and I know a lot of you know this, there's one ace that she gave mankind as a weapon against kochia. It has to do with the seed. Yeah. Short seed life. Kirk, about 2 years?
Yeah. Really, just 1.
1 year. If you can keep your land free of kochia without the tumbleweeds tumbling across it, if you can keep your land weed free for 1 year, or if you have kochia and not let it go to seed, you can pretty much eliminate that seed in your soil. So that's an option. That's something to help us. Maybe I'll just turn the time over to Kirk.
Last year we had several samples of kochia come in for glyphosate survival, and we did a lot of screening in the greenhouse over the winter. Fortunately, we were able to control quite a few of those populations, and even though they presented difficulties for control in the field, in the greenhouse, even at our standard long-term rate, not the cut rate of a pint per acre like so many of you went to, but a quart of a 3-pound gallon was controlling many of those populations that presented control issues in the field. So we are still identifying and detecting separation in controllability because of environments, and this year was a difficult environment for a lot of different situations. And many people were not able to get their soil applied products out. You mentioned the questions that come up with the kochia and the common ragweed. The best option for a lot of crops controlling kochia is that soil program. We're seeing a lot more people move back to using soil applied products, and for kochia, really that's any product that has sulfentrazone in it. I talked with FMC person yesterday, and that's their molecule, about resistance, and they feel that it's going to be a fairly stable molecule for a long time, because they don't really see that a lot of people are using it yet, which surprised me, because I thought everybody was going to Spartan or Authority, or the new one we got to come out is got some Marvel, right? It has some sulfentrazone in it. Still a very, very effective, very active chemical for kochia. But if you didn't have that down pre, by the time you could apply your post-emergent treatments, there wasn't really anything left for a lot of the row crops to be able to effectively kill kochia. Once that plant gets taller than 2 inches, the products like Flexstar, Reflex, they don't have enough activity on those larger plants to be able to kill the whole thing, and so 2 weeks after you spray it and it looks all brown, you've got the regrowth coming back from the base of the plant. So being very timely in the herbicide application is going to give you the best advantage to manage those post-emergence populations. At the same time we were screening with glyphosate, we were also running the samples through 2 rates of fluroxapyr, so starane at the full field rate and then a 2x field rate. And out of the 80-some samples that came in, there was a lot of survival at even a full field rate, individual plants here and there. But when we were doing follow-up testing, we demonstrated that in the greenhouse there is more kochia survival, and that those samples that initially had plants surviving really didn't respond any differently than our susceptible populations that we had been collecting over the years. But we did have about 5 locations that presented issues at the higher rates, and when we did the follow-up dose response, we're demonstrating about 8 to 9x resistance level. So 5 out of 80 doesn't sound too bad, but one of those is up in Grand Forks, one was in Pierce County, one was out in Golden Valley County, one's down near Lisbon, and another one is in Cass County. So we have the potential for widespread resistance to fluroxapyr. And being mindful of that and making sure that your post-emergence treatments are being very effective is going to be very important for making sure that we don't have the explosion of resistant fluroxapyr kochia like we saw with the ALS kochia back in the late 80s, or with the glyphosate kochia down in Kansas. Because of the biology of the kochia, you've mentioned the fact that we've got one thing to work with, and that's the biology of the seed longevity. But everything else pretty much stacks against us for the spread of resistant kochia problems. So making sure that we, even in cereals where we have more opportunities for that post-emergence treatment, make making sure that the post-emergent treatment is applied in a timely manner so that you get the optimal activity is important. And then also, regardless of what crop it is, post-harvest, pre-harvest management of kochia is very important. And it seeds later in the fall. Most of our crops are harvested about the time kochia seed starts to get to set. And you may be able to harvest before that seed becomes viable. But you also have to beware that that stubble that's left in the field, each of those stubble plants can produce 12 to 15,000 seeds after harvest. So you have to go back through the field and make sure that you're managing that green stubble that's out in the field and preventing that from going to seed later in the fall.
Kirk and I were talking earlier about how we will add a herbicide in with Roundup to plug the hole, to pick up whatever weed we're missing. And Kirk made a profound statement, and it has to do with the rate that we use these herbicides that we plug the holes.
All right, let's say you're putting together an herbicide tank mix. What is the rate of the tank mix product that you put in? How many of you put in the full labeled rate of that second expensive product?
Or, as an alternative, they will do...
Yeah, okay, so how many of you now will cut back the rate of that second product so that you can afford that chemical application? Short term. Yeah, as the hands start to go up. Right? We're trying to make cost-effective weed control, and if you cut back the rate and you scout the field and you know that nothing is surviving, that's great. But as we put together these combinations, and even the corn and soybean micro rate, we're looking at multiple products at sub-lethal rates by themselves. So if you do end up with resistance to one of those products in that combination, well, all that's left now to manage that weed is a sub-lethal rate of the next thing, which enables the progression of resistance to that one even more rapidly than if we had been just applying the second product at the full rate. So again, management of the population, monitoring of the field, scouting to make sure that you know what's there, get things applied at timely, scouting afterwards if you're going to be using those lower cost combinations of products. You still have to make sure that you're doing the primary activity is killing the weeds that are out there, right? Dead weeds don't produce seed. Plant that produces no seed is not a resistance issue. So maybe you got some other questions that you'd like to ask.
How about the adjuvant package to go along with it, like Power
Okay,
Master?
can an adjuvant make any, you mean with the resistant population?
Yeah.
Okay, how many think that if you put the most aggressive adjuvant package with the herbicide, it's going to give you greater control of the resistant weed? Anthony, explain yourself. He says it depends on what the resistance is from.
The resistance is genetic. An adjuvant isn't going to help you. Resistance is a form of avoidance, hairs on the leaves, waxy cuticle, whatever. An adjuvant may overcome the resistance. So it depends on what your resistance is.
Anthony sounds like an extension professional.
So Anthony, in the case of glyphosate, would that resistance be internal or external? Are we having trouble get the glyphosate in the plant, or is the plant doing something to the glyphosate once it gets in?
The plant is producing more of the enzyme, and maybe in some situations not a lot more, but you would have to quadruple the rate of the herbicide to be able to fill all those enzyme sites to knock it out.
Anthony, hot off the press, in Weed Science just 1 week ago, I have more information to give you. There is one weed that Andrew Niss and the scientists in Wisconsin found that won't let glyphosate into the plant. So to answer your question, there's one weed where adjuvants will help. What is the name of the weed? Okay, it's in there. Which weed is it?
The only weed they can identify is this one. Come on.
Lamb's quarter.
Hot off the press, Anthony. It looks like Lamb's Quarters has a way of minimizing the uptake of glyphosate into the plant. So if you can get more, use good adjuvants and get it into the plant, you'll likely get more.
The Lamb's Quarters plant, I think Richard has done a fair amount of work with the leaf surface
Oh, they may not know that.
and understanding what happens to droplets on the leaf surface.
if you have an eyedropper, just if you want to do something cool with your kids, just take an eyedropper and drop little droplets of water or your herbicide mixture, and it'll hit the leaf just like a basketball, and it just bounces right off the leaf. This leaf is the most hydrophobic leaf there is, this right here. So the problem, like I was talking to Anthony, is getting the droplets to stick to the leaf. So if you can use a good sticker adjuvant, and I've tested a lot of them, and a lot of them don't do very well, but there are a few that do, and use a good sticker to help get that droplet